Today on the Poor Man podcast, we're going to talk about El Salvador and the El Salvadoran president Nayib Bukele, as well as Bitcoin. Well, if you don't know who Nayib Bukele is the El Salvadorian president who was elected in 2019, and he's the 43rd president of that country, and he was also a businessman. Well, the interesting thing about Nayib Bukele is that he's gone really heavy into Bitcoin. Not only has it made it a legal tender in his country, but he has also begun a crusade to make sure that people adopt Bitcoin. He also started something called and started building a Bitcoin city where people can come from all over the world and they can participate in that. So the question today is all that crazy or is it not crazy? Why has Nayib Bukele gone deep into Bitcoin? And is it does it hold merit or is this just another stunt by some guy who doesn't know what he's doing? Well, just a little bit of a news flash. I do not think that Nayib Bukele is crazy. I actually think that he has a reason for doing this. The first reason for doing this and the primary reason for doing this is because El Salvador's GDP is $32.5 billion. Now, by the time it was 2019 when it came into power, Bitcoin already been around for quite a bit since the 2007-2008 financial crisis. It had grown from something that one person or group of people did, writing a bunch of white paper, and to something that had grown to a global phenomenon. Bitcoin had gone from something like maybe worthless to maybe like $1, and it's seen it climb up to 66,000. Now imagine if you've gotten into Bitcoin when it was like $10 and you held a bunch of your Bitcoins. Wow, you'd be like a multi-millionaire, billionaire multiple times over, right? So by the time Nayib Bukele went into this, he'd already seen the fruit of Bitcoin. So it's not about that, right? The question is, he had to make a decision as to whether Bitcoin was going to continue to stay around or whether Bitcoin was going to go the way of the dinosaurs and it'd be really crazy. Now, at this point in time, he had to consider a few different things, but the biggest thing he had to consider is this. Is Bitcoin going to be used as a store of value or is it going to become a trusted means of exchange? Those are two questions he had to ask himself. The other thing he had to think to himself was, well, even if Bitcoin is not used as either, is there money to be made in the present that is going to benefit the country of El Salvador? Well, the answer to that last question is simple. When he took a look at it, he said, yep, I've made my decision. I think there's going to be enough momentum in Bitcoin, right, for me to be able to invest in it, maybe then take my country's money out of it, but then my people would be in a much better position than they were in. If you don't know how Bitcoin is doing year to date, it is the best performing asset in its class, so to speak, and it is up over 130%, right? So compared to things like gold, compared to things like other stocks, etc., Bitcoin is just doing incredibly well. But if you've not heard of Bitcoin and you think it's kind of crazy, what I really want to do is go through maybe why Bitcoin, some of the points against Bitcoin, and then let's take a look back about what Nayib Bukele did. Okay? So the first reason why Nayib Bukele might have gone into Bitcoin, and these are now the why Bitcoin, is that Bitcoin is not inflationary. What do I mean by inflationary? Well, the reality is that money continues to lose its value year after year after year. That means that if you get $10 10 years from now, it's not going to be worth $10 if you have it today, right? Because things are becoming more expensive over time and your money is becoming more worthless over time, okay? That is to say, if you get a raise, right, the first thing you need to do really is first compare the raise that you got to the rate of inflation. And then only if the raise that you got is higher than the rate of inflation, you're actually making progress in life. Otherwise, from a real wage perspective, you're actually not making any money. In fact, you're losing money and you will feel poorer, although you're making more money than you did before. So just to give you an example, right? if you had $1 million, let's say in the 1980s, you had a heck of a lot more money then. You probably need something like 20 something million dollars just to feel just as rich, because that is the purchasing power then was way more powerful. Okay, I'm betting that you get it now from an inflation perspective. Now, let me throw the stat at you. If you take a look at all the countries in the world and take a look at the average inflation in the world, it comes out to be around 14%. What does 14% mean globally? It means that you need to have earned, if you take a look at the entire globe and how things are, of course, the money is skewed towards the US, but if you take a look at the entire globe, you need, right, to make an extra $2,000 a year just to make sure you keep pace with the global rate of inflation, which is 14%. Now, if you didn't know, of the 9 billion-ish people that are in the world, about just a little bit less than half of them live on less than $3 to $4 a day. All right. That means that people are not making $2,000 a year. What that means for those people is that they're getting poorer, and the gap between the poor and the rich will continue to go up. More people are going to become poor, and only a small percentage of people will become richer, which is going to create all sorts of chaos and political instability, and there's going to be wars, and things are just going to be bad. All right. So that is the one key thing about Bitcoin. It is not inflationary. Which other currencies are that are not in this asset class? All right. The fact that it's not inflationary actually makes it a little bit more stable, and it means that people's money are secure. You want to know why money stability is important? Just go ask the people of Venezuela. I'll go ask the people of Zimbabwe. And right now, go ask the people of Argentina that same question, and you'll find out that you can work all your life. But rampant inflation can mean that all your life work actually means nothing, and it has nothing to do with you. So if you're somebody that doesn't care for inflation, then it means you care for that asset class, you care for Bitcoin. The second reason why people are interested in Bitcoin is because of access to capital. The reality is that capitalism works only if people have access to capital. And the way the monetary system works today is that only a few gatekeepers decide who gets access to capital. Whether that's IMF or the International Monetary Fund, whether that's the World Bank, whether that is the bank in your city or in your town. If you don't have a bank account, guess what? You really can't get access to capital. And even if you do have a bank account, guess what? You go to that bank and they say, you know what, you're not credit worthy. We cannot give you access to the capital that you need to invest so that you can actually be productive. And that means that you're not really taking part in capitalism, okay? Capitalism works for those who have capital. It doesn't work for those who don't have capital, right? To be able to participate in capitalism, you need to make yourself capital worthy, for lack of a better word. If you're not worthy for capital, or if somebody deems you not worthy for capital, then guess what? You are out of luck, and that is it. Now, here's the funny thing. A lot of these gatekeepers, access to capital is not a thing when you think about Bitcoin, right? You don't need to go to a bank. You don't need to beg anybody or anything else like that, right? In order to get Bitcoin and to get access to capital, right? Because you don't have these banks as a gatekeeper, anybody with a computer or an internet connection and a phone, right, can get access to that capital. You don't actually need a bank account. That means that the person that you've been wanted to help, that you've not been able to help because they don't have a bank account, now you do not need, right, to go through all sorts of loops and crazy things to get them money. Which brings me to the third point, which is for Bitcoin, which is, again, this is really key. It doesn't need a bank account. Now, I want to tell you a story about a lady in Afghanistan, right? The thing about this lady is that she wanted to work and she wanted to be productive, but unfortunately, the rules that were set forth by the Taliban was that women cannot open a bank account, and her uncle did not want her to work or do anything or go to school, so therefore, that was it. She was out of luck. Well, with Bitcoin, with cryptocurrency, the fact that she has a phone, she can get paid now in this cryptocurrency, or, for lack of a better word, in the OG of cryptocurrencies, which is Bitcoin. And if she can get paid in Bitcoin at that point in time, then guess what? Then she's not being controlled anymore. A life is not being controlled anymore, which is absolutely key here. Okay? So Bitcoin can actually be a thing that brings freedom and equality, right, in the space, right? Number one, imagine countries that where women cannot have bank accounts, or regimes rather, maybe let me not say country. Guess what? They cannot take part, right? And they're always going to be left behind. But if you have something like Bitcoin, then guess what? Those people don't have to have that same issue. Now, consider this as well, because this is important, right? Imagine country A, where in country A, only about 50% have access to bank account because it's a poor country. But country B, 90% have access to bank account. Guess what? Who's going to do better? Well, clearly it's going to be country B, because in country B, people have more access to loans, etc. And guess what? They can get access to capital, and that capital will be able to produce more. And it is something then that gets to start to snowball. And one country loses, another country wins. With Bitcoin, this is not the case. All right? That brings me to my fourth point. With Bitcoin, there is no central control. Okay? Money is centrally controlled. Only a few organizations, only a few people do it. When I talk about central control, you may not know this, but if you've ever heard of the SWIFT system, it's the way people move money around the world, and it's primarily controlled by the US. Now, here's the funny thing, right? If for some reason the US doesn't like you, the US can decide, you know what, I'm going to cut you off the SWIFT system. And guess what? You're done. You can't really transact with different people because you can't move money around. You can't do trade. You can't do many different things. Now, this is why, by the way, the countries that are known as BRICS, and that includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that makes up the acronym BRICS. This is why they're looking to go away from the US dollar, because they're saying, hey, that is quite crazy, right? And so therefore, something like Bitcoin kind of solves all that problem. And then another thing that I want to bring up, the fifth point that I want to bring up now, is the transfer fees, right, and the transaction speed. When you take a look at the currency you have today, right, there's a ridiculous amount of transfer fees, right? For example, if I wanted to send money to a place like Mauritania, for example, firstly, I get hit on the exchange rate. Secondly, there are massive transfer fees. And thirdly, I need to get somebody to go probably to the capital to get access to that money and then take it physically to somebody that is in a remote area. That's crazy. There's a lot of bribing that takes place and you don't even know what's happening to the money, right? With something like Bitcoin, you don't have to worry about that, right? Because as long as the person that you want to send money to, if I want to send money to somebody in Mauritania, has a phone, even if they don't have internet access there, they can just make their way to the capital. And guess what? Once they get internet access, then in just a few minutes, I can transfer that money. It's taken nothing, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes maximum, or it can even be instantaneous. They get access to the money. They can go to the capital, exchange that for cash, take the money. Now they don't have to hear somebody's cock and bull story about, oh, well, you know, I had to pay this person off. This only person sent only this much. And you have less leakage. Okay? So these are some of the reasons why people like Nayib Bukele and other people are interested in Bitcoin. One, your money doesn't lose value. Two, you get access to a lot of capital, so a lot of people can participate in it, which is better for people in the poor countries. Three, you don't have to lose money just transferring money. Today, globally, about $2 trillion worth is lost just by transfer fees. What could we do with that kind of money? Four, there's no central bank control. And if you think central control is good, just think again, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Argentina. And five, you don't even need a bank account. All you need is a phone and an internet access to make sure that it works. That is why Bitcoin. Now, to be fair, there's some other reasons why people are saying, no, we don't care for Bitcoin. Why? One of the things that people say is that it uses a large amount of energy. Okay? Now, I'm going to talk about the life cycle of energy usage of Bitcoin versus, let's say, other currencies that you have. If you've ever held any other currency in your hand, it's cash, right? It's like paper, okay? Or it's a coin. Guess what? To be able to mint that coin, you needed a lot of energy to go into it. You needed metal. That metal that you need came from mines. That requires a lot of energy. The minting press itself requires a lot of energy. Then you need to put it on trucks. Then you need to make sure that it circulates around, and collecting it takes a lot of manpower. You need cars, trucks, etc. And even the paper money as well, you have the same thing. The ink costs money, right? You use a lot of water. You cut down trees if it's indeed paper money, right? You need trucks to move it around to different ATMs, for lack of a better word, and those ATMs consume a lot of energy. That is to say that if you take a look at the life cycle for Bitcoin investments or cryptocurrency investments, what you're going to find is that you use actually a lot less energy for something like Bitcoin than you do for the currency that we have today. The second thing against Bitcoin that people talk about is that it is used for illegal stuff, right? And many people think they can use it for illegal stuff because they think it's untraceable. Newsflash, it is actually traceable, and it is actually probably more traceable than the currency that people are using today. But that's enough for another podcast, okay? But here's the thing. If you take a look at the amount of illicit activity that actually takes place in currencies that you have today versus, let's say, something like Bitcoin, it is way higher for the currencies that you have today that is not in the asset class of Bitcoin. So again, we can kind of poo-poo that. So when you start to take a look at the whole story, number one, there are good things that can happen for El Salvador because of Bitcoin. One, it's an exciting new asset class, so people can go to Bitcoin City and it brings foreign direct investment for El Salvador. Two, a lot of people can have more access to capital, and because of that, more people in El Salvador can actually participate in capitalism. Three, people who don't have as much money don't have to spend all their money on transfer fees in El Salvador, and that transaction is fast and you have less leakage. Four, people in El Salvador who don't have bank accounts can also participate, and there's equity and equality taking place here. Fifth, the government can actually track a lot of illegal stuff that's going on, and so therefore it actually helps with that, with regards to the country. And sixth, when Nayib Bukele bought Bitcoin, right, it's already been something that has proven itself as an asset class. And with the price of Bitcoin potentially able to go up to, people talk about 250,000, 500,000, 1 million, he would have made a heck of a lot of money for his country versus the downside risk, which is that Bitcoin is going to zero. So this is why Nayib Bukele decided to get into Bitcoin for El Salvador. Now, time will tell, right, whether it was genius or if it was crazy. But given what's happening with the bull cycle again that's taking place, I think we can pretty much say confidently right now, Nayib Bukele is looking a little bit like a genius. And that is to say, if you've not looked into it, look at it yourself. Don't just listen to the stories. Read books about it and see if it's something that is right for you as well. Okay? Thank you so much. That's it. Poor man out.